Alright, so let's say that you're getting a new MacBook or you're new to the Apple ecosystem and you're gonna get a Mac. So let's quickly go through the different types of Macs. This is like with a huge disclaimer. This is very personal. Everyone will use these machines differently. However, there are certain limits of these machines and that's when you see them differentiate from one another. Alright, so let's start with the first one and likely the entry model of any Mac, and that is the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air can be quickly summarized as the entry model machine that has a lot of power. However, the limiting factor of the MacBook Air is that it doesn't have any fans inside. Once it reaches a certain temperature, it will start to throttle to try and prevent itself basically from, well, cooking itself to death. Also, the MacBook Air, if it wasn't obvious already, is a laptop and it's usually the lightest one of them all. Now, the next machine is the MacBook Pro. Now, the MacBook Pros come in different sizes and they also come with different chipsets. One key thing that really differentiates the MacBook Pros from the MacBook Airs is that the MacBook Pros have fans and they can be far more powerful. Their chips will be different. And when it comes to use case scenarios, they tend to be used for where you do a lot of like GPU intensive tasks. All those things that require a lot of sustained performance, that's where the MacBook Pros really shine. The MacBook Pros can get hideously expensive. Like I'm talking about like over $5,000, like over $7,000 here in New Zealand. So be aware of like how pricey these things get, because all that performance comes obviously for a great cost. The next in line is the Mac Mini, which is essentially a desktop version of a computer. It is a very small computer. It's 5 by 5 inches. So it's not going to take a lot of space on your table. And just like the MacBook Pros, the chip inside these computers can actually be also upgraded. However, keep in mind that upgrading anything in these computers, all of them, that will result in a higher price increase. And there are some things that have to be upgraded simultaneously. So if you increase, say, the chip inside the computer, you also have to increase the RAM. And you might think, is that just extra RAM that you get for free? No, it just automatically adds the RAM and you can't actually deselect it. And the Mac Mini is essentially just a stationary computer or desktop computer, but very, very powerful. But it's a great machine when it comes to like video and content creation. The same things basically that you can do with the MacBook Pros, you can do with the Mac Mini. It's just that the MacBook Pros obviously is a laptop with a built-in screen, while this thing you also have to provide the mouse, the keyboard, and the monitor for yourself. There's also the iMac, which is essentially a two-in-one sort of like desktop. And as you might know by now, they are razor-thin computers. Like there's nothing really special about this. It's like any other standard computer. And similar to the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio, the limiting factor here is that they're mainly designed to be stationary, not really to be carried around. Yeah, that's the iMac. Very straightforward. And next in line is the Mac Studio. And the Mac Studio is essentially a beefed up version of that Mac Mini. There's nothing really special about this except that it's far more powerful than a Mac Mini. You can do things like animations, just very graphically and GPU intensive tasks. Lastly, we also have the Mac Pro, which is essentially like a proper desktop. However, this computer, if you wanted that, you would know, because this thing costs like 17,000 New Zealand dollars. So compared to, you know, the Mac Mini that's under $1,000, you will have a really good idea why you're after a Mac Pro. Just keep in mind that the limiting factors of all the computers that I've mentioned in this video will be the chipsets, and the chipsets will differ depending on which type of Mac that you get. So there is all of this like really confusing things. So just make sure that these computers have very specific use purposes. Yes, like the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, those can be versatile. That's the whole point of those. The laptops, they're meant to be taken everywhere, and they're meant to also deliver a lot of performance and battery life. But remember that if you're not moving as much, that's when the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio come in. These machines, obviously, they don't have to worry about battery life and they're plugged in all the time. And usually the limiting factor of these machines when you make a purchase is, well, money, because they can get really expensive. So there you go. I hope that helped you. I did not include the iPad because that is obviously not a Mac, and you will know if you need an iPad because it's a completely different thing. That's like saying, do I need a bus or a car? Go check out Apple's website and see the different options that they have to offer, and I will see you in the next one.